All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Happy Tourist Guide Day to you all. So the Tourist Guide Day is celebrated each year on the 21st of February. So to celebrate this day this year, the Seychelles Islands Foundation would like to share with the tourist guides that come to the Vallée de Mai some of the research work that is undertaken in the Vallée de Mai Reserve. Before we start, I would like to give you the order of the presentation. We will start with the Black Parrot presentation by Monica, followed by Coco de Mer presentation by Leroy. And then Jessica will present about the yellow president projects in the Vallée de Mai. And lastly, Irma will do a herpofauna presentation. Just to note that you will be able to ask questions, like we will take questions right after each presentation. So without any further delay, I would like to now invite Monica to do her presentation. Monica.
Okay, so my name is Monica Griffith. I'm the Black Parrot Project Officer here at the Vallée de Mai. Just talk about parrots. So the black parrot, Seychelles black parrot, the Latin name is Coracoxus archei, and it is the only parrot left in the Seychelles. So there used to be another parrot species, native parrot species on Mahe and on Silhouette. That one's now extinct, so we're left with the Coracoxus archei here in France. It was thought that the Seychelles black parrot was a subspecies of one of the Madagascar black parrots, the Coracoxus nigra. But genetic research in 2014 confirmed that actually not only is the Seychelles parrot a separate species, it's actually genetically older than the other three black parrots. So it's kind of the original one. Makes it even more exciting. Part of the project has looked at trying to work out the population size of black parrots here in France. So in 2013, there was a census that estimated we had up to 900 parrots here. And then in 2018, there was another census which suggested there could be up to 1,700. Now this does look like the population is doing really well, but actually the population is stable. There is no real difference. What changed is we improved our methods of counting. So on figures, it does look like they're doing amazingly well and they're breeding very successfully. Actually, we think that the population has stayed. It's just that counting. So, as I'm sure everybody knows, the parrots only breed on pranin. We have some evidence of them going to curias, but only to feed, not to breed. Maybe one day in the future, as curias Coco de Mer forest gets taller and older, maybe they will breed there one day, but currently they only breed on pranin. So the SIF Black Parrot project began in 2009. It's well over 10 years old now. And the aims was pretty much to find out everything. Up until then, the parrots had not been studied. There was very little known, just sort of some assumptions. So we were looking for the basic biology and ecology of the parrots. Where do they live? How long do they live? Anything really. What are the reproductive constraints? So like what would lower their breeding success? We're looking at their breeding behavior, in particular using ringing, so rings on their legs, and birds, and then see where they go, see which other parrots they're interacting with, if they always stay in one place, if they fly up and down pranin 10 times every day, anything. And then finally, we're looking at threats. What is stopping the breeding success, reducing their success? So not only stopping breeding, but maybe affecting the population as a whole. So the specs of the parrot project at the beginning was sort of find out everything. So we use colored rings on the parrots to find out all sorts. So crucially, how long do they live? We have parrots that were ringed in 2010 that are still alive. So we know they live at least 12 years. That's as far as we can go so far. Do they mate for life? We don't know that yet either. Do they reuse old nests? They do seem to use nests again when they've had success. So by identifying a female at a nest with her rings, and then seeing which female uses that nest next year after year, we can start to see if they're coming back to the same places. We can see who their helpers are, who helps them to raise their chicks. And do they stay in family groups, or do they just all do their own thing? Are they sort of separate little cliques? So the rings really help us answer a lot of questions. And the main focus of the project has always been the breeding side of the black parrots. So we looked at the breeding behavior. The Seychelles black parrot is unique in that every single breeding female has her own identifiable call. So once you are familiar with the calls, you can walk around the forest and you can go, oh, that one's silver, silver. Oh, listen to that call, it's purple, orange. And when you know them, you can pick them out. This is highly unusual. We don't really know why, but it's quite helpful for us. What we do know for certain is that imitating this breeding call can cause her to abandon her nest. So we'll abandon her eggs or her chicks, and so really have a negative impact on the breeding. So when people go into the forest and they hear the parrot whistle, and then people like to whistle back to the parrot, this can be detrimental, and we beg everybody not to do it. And it is tempting, but it really can cause, in the past, chicks have starved to death because the adult parrots don't come back. We know that the females can have up to like 1 to 3 helpers that come and give her food and provide her with food so that then she can spend more time with her chicks and her eggs. And we think that only the female incubates the eggs and the chicks. So even though the helpers come to the area and give her food, it's only her that goes inside the nest, we think. But so the helpers come, they feed her, and then she goes back inside. It really reduces the amount of time that she's off the eggs. So we're able to look more effort into looking after her chicks and her eggs. So the parrots, as I said, they all have their unique call. And there's some, if I can press play. Is this working? It's not working, is it? Miss Maria, is this playing? Well, these are the sonograms of the calls. In theory, you should be able to hear them, but somehow screen sharing didn't let that happen. Sorry. It was just to emphasize the variation in the calls, how much you really can pick out the difference once you're familiar with them. So this here is a helper, the one on the right, feeding the breeding female, who is this bird on the left. So the helper arrives to the nest, calls to the female inside to come out, I've got some food for you, and feeds her, which means that she can then go back inside her nest really quickly. But we also know, so she just went down the tree a little bit, it's not just, say, her mate that feeds her, because this is the same female then going to another bird and being fed by it as well. So we know that multiple birds come and they all help look after the female. What we don't know is who these helpers are. Maybe they are all of her mates. Maybe she mates with lots of different birds and they all help to look after the chicks. Maybe they are her own offspring from previous years, or maybe her siblings. We're not really very sure about this. Something that we hope to be able to answer in the future. So the typical breeding behavior that we look for is the most visually obvious thing to anybody in the forest is that their beaks change color. So although called the black parrot, we know they're sort of chocolate brown the whole way, like from head to toe. But in the breeding season, the birds change their beak color to this sort of pale yellow kind of color. At certain times, it's really quite obvious, the color difference. And then gradually it fades back to brown again. It's the males and the females who change. We know that they nest in natural cavities, so they don't build a nest or make a hole in a tree themselves, but they just find a hole in the tree and they use that. Typically, they begin to lay eggs in November, December, and will lay up to 4 eggs in a nest. We start getting chicks in December to January. We get fledging by the end of February, and all of the nests are typically gone by the end of April. Even though nests can have up to 4 eggs, mostly they only have 1 to 2 fledglings. This is because it can be very resource heavy to raise 4 chicks, and the weak ones will die off. So it means that it's only the stronger ones that are actually managing to fledge. Over time, so since the first breeding season that was monitored, we've begun to notice patterns in the breeding activity. So we've begun to see that we get 3 years of good breeding, like lots of nests, lots of eggs and chicks, and then we get 1 year of very little. Then we get another 3 years of good breeding, and then 1 year of very little. So in season 10, we expected it would be, sorry, season 11, we expected would be a low breeding year, and we were right. We didn't see any pale beaks. We didn't hear breeding calls. We didn't have any nests. Season 12 was a bit of a surprise. We expected it to be a good year. We're currently in season 12 right now, and we had a mysterious, we've had 2 breeding seasons this year. We had 1 breeding event in July and 1 in December. We don't have any idea why this has happened. Both times they seem to have, we've had up to 30 eggs. So it's been good breeding in each occurrence. We may be possibly due to climate, we're not entirely sure what's caused this. So monitoring the black parrots is a real problem because mostly it's really hard to see them in the coconut forest. Massive leaves that are really high up, to see one little brown bird and try and see its legs, to see its ring colors, is a real challenge. We know that they mostly nest in dead coconut mer, and because it's dead, then we can't climb it because that would be really dangerous. So then we have to come up with other methods to try and observe the birds inside the nest. So we have a baby monitor on an extendable pole here that we lift up, and we can lower into nests when the nest is low enough for us to reach it like this. We also use freestanding ladders. We have to tie these ladders with ropes. We cannot have it leaning on the tree because the tree is dead, so you could push it over. So we have to have it standing next to the tree, so we use the ropes to support it. So you can see here, the ladder is not actually touching this tree. It's a bit scary to work on. All of this is incredibly time consuming. So it limits what monitoring we are able to carry out. So we monitor in the valley and from Prepare and in from Ferdinand, but ideally we would monitor all of Pranin, but obviously it's just impossible. We know that the parrots face lots of various threats. So crucially, number 1, nest predation. In the forest, we have feral cats, feral rats. They are both invasive species. They will both eat eggs and chicks. And they're a real problem. The parrots are not evolved to deal with predators. They don't seem to know that they've got a big sharp beak that they could maybe defend themselves with. So there's nothing that they can do. We also know that they will suffer from competition. So both rats and miners will use the nest for their own. So they take up the nest space. So if all of the available cavities in the forest are full of rats and miners, then there's nowhere for the parrots to live. So then they can't breed. Climate change is going to become a progressively bigger issue. We've had some massive storms this year that have shown have more rainfall than other records, and during those storms we lost nests. So we know that the climate is becoming a bit more and more of a problem. We also suspect maybe the climate changing is the cause of the breeding that happened in July. So it seems to be just throwing the parrots off balance, and they don't seem to be able to read the environmental signs so much anymore. There is also the possibility of disease because there's such a small population. So the ringneck parakeets that were on Mahe had a parrot disease. And if they had managed to come over here and the parrots had caught that disease, then it could wipe out the whole population because they're so small and they only live in one area. So there wouldn't be anybody safe. That's why the ringneck eradication happened. This is a nest from season 10. So the bird on the right is the female, the one on the left is the chick, about 2 or 3 days before it fledged. So when the chick gets older, the female calls it to the top rather than going down to encourage it to start using its muscles a bit more and climbing around and learning to use its wings. So then she fed it at the top of the nest. That night, in the same nest, this rat turned up. Unfortunately, the chick was still in the nest and they can't defend themselves from rats. It's a real problem. So that's some of the work that's been carried out. SIF completed the ringneck parakeet eradication on Mahe to protect the black parrots. We are currently running a rat tracking trial to see if we trap rats in the Vallée de Mai, does that increase the nest success? And we've also been conducting YCA baiting that you will hear more about later. The current tracking trial, we have 3 different levels of rat traps intensity around various nests. And we can see that where we have high intensity rat trapping, we have more successful nests. Where we have no rat trapping, we have more nest failures. So it would seem that when you trap rats, you get more nest success. Crucially, what it does not mean is that rats are the only problem, because even in the place where we have high intensity trapping, we still have some failures, just not due to rats. So there are other things that are causing nest failures, not just rats. But we can see that rats are a massive problem for the parrots. So season 12, which is the current season we're in, has been highly unusual and has had 2 breeding events. It is the first time we have a record of any breeding occurring in July, and we do not know what caused this. We know that not all of the birds bred in July, so we could see brown beaks and yellow beaks around. We heard breeding calls, but not as many as if all of the population were breeding. We got 14 nests in total and 10 fledglings from all of those nests, which is not super high numbers, but it's decent for a breeding season, particularly one that was a surprise breeding season. What we weren't sure is, because they bred in July, would they then breed again at the normal time of year, or would they have just switched entirely? But it turned out they started again in December. Again, we didn't have the same number of nests as we would normally expect. This time we had 16. So far, it does seem to be that it's different females breeding now than bred in July. So it would seem that the ones that did breed before either couldn't, or they're still looking after the fledglings. So they don't seem to be breeding now. What we have seen is the birds that bred in July helping at nests in December. So they're still involved in the breeding process, just not actively breeding themselves. But this season, we have this in the second breeding event, we have had a really high nest failure rate so far. We've had egg infertility, so where there's just there's nothing growing inside the egg. We've had embryo death, so the developing chick inside the egg dies before it manages to hatch. We've had nest predation, it was seen from minors. We've had nest collapse, so the inside of the cavity has just dropped away while there's still eggs there, and this breaks the eggs. And we've had the intense storms that have killed off nests. So the nest collapsing and these storms would both seem to be due to climate change. So we've had a really high failure rate, and this is really quite a, even though we started with 16 active nests, we've now only got 4. So we don't know if those will succeed, but it's upsettingly low numbers. In total, the parrot project has ringed more than 350 parrots across Bralin. We've monitored 163 nests, and we've had 103 fledglings. All started out life looking like that. This is my favorite picture of a parrot. It would be very helpful if anybody ever sees parrots with their rings on. If you're taking tourists around the valley and they take photographs that show the rings, if they can send these photos to blackparrot@sif.sc, we can collect data from this information. Even if they're from their hotel, from wherever they see them on Bralin or on Curious, then if they submit these photos, then we can really gather a lot of information. So if you keep spreading that word, particularly if you see that they have a very keen photographers and big fancy cameras, that can be really beneficial to us. That's all from me. Is there any questions? Questions? Everybody's on mute.
No question.
Okay, looks like there's no question.
No question. All good.
All good.
All
All right, so if there's no question, I would like to thank Monica for her presentation.
No.
Are there any questions?
I have a quick question. Sorry, when our guides are taking tourists around Vallée de Mai, what is kind of the one thing you would want tourists to leave with really understanding, or the best way that they could assist SIF in the work that you're doing? Like, what's the key message you would want to pass on there?
So these parrots are absolutely unique. The fact that every female has her own why. It's desperately trying to data that we gather. If they see the birds with their rings anywhere on Bralin, then it would be so helpful for them to send us those pictures. And crucially, as tempting as it is, do not whistle to the parrots. To stand and admire them by all means, but not to try and interact. Because we have, in the past, we have lost nests. And we know that actually, because they are intelligent birds and they are, they interact with a family group. So the fact that they all have their own call means they all have their own identity. And if you start using their call at them, it's kind of like stealing their identity, and it can cause a lot of stress for them. So I think that.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Are there any more questions?
We have one question.
Yeah.
Do you have a record of breeding of the black parrot on Curious Island?
Can you say that again, please?
Do you have the record of the black parrot on curious? Or do you have breeding on curious?
Well, that's quite an interesting question, and it's one that we have looked at in the past. So there is records of the parrots being seen on curious, and crucially of evidence of breeding, even when they haven't been, feeding, sorry. Like when you see a bilombi tree that's got a lot of fruit, and you see the parrots in them, parrots are really messy eaters, so they leave a lot of bits of fruit all over the floor. So there have been times when there's a bilombi near the doctor's house on Curious, and somebody saw there underneath it all of this dropped bits of fruit with like triangle marks in it that looked like parrots have been eating it. But when they saw that, they didn't see the parrots, they just see what looks a lot like parrots eating. Curious is really very close, so there is no reason why they wouldn't be able to fly to Curious. We have no record of them breeding there though, but we think because Curious had the fires, so the forest is very young. So the parrots need natural cavities to breed in. So to breed in the Coco de Mer cavity, for that to happen, the Coco de Mer needs to grow up, mature, get old, die, and then start to rot. So it's 250 years, maybe, for the cavity to be produced for the parrot. Okay. As the Coco de Mer on Curious begins to grow more, and the forest gets more, gets denser, that maybe the parrots will breed on Curious naturally, because they could easily fly back and forth. But right now, there is no evidence of it.
Okay, thank
Okay, do you have more questions
for
Monica? Okay. So if there's no more questions for Monica, I would like to thank Monica for her presentation, and now invite Leroy to do a presentation about the Coco de Mer project in the Vallée de Mai.
No?
Good morning, everyone. Already here at Vallée de Mai. Yeah? So, everything is okay? So, today I'm going to be talking about the Coco de Mer, of course, and I'm guessing most of you know a little bit about the history or the basic knowledge of CDM. The scientific name, I'm going to say CDM often in this presentation. It's short for Coco de Mer, by the way. Lodoisha madelpica is the scientific name of Coco de Mer, which is found here on Praslin naturally, and it can be found on other islands like Mahé, Ladi, Silhouette. These have been introduced by men. So we're going to start by saying why we conserve the species in general. So obviously it's endemic to the Seychelles, and it's very symbolic to the Seychelles as well. So by symbolic, what I mean is like it's basically our identity, you can say. So pretty much as soon as you name the Seychelles, people coming to visit the Seychelles, what they want to see most of the time is the Coco de Mer, because the shape is so unique and it's unlikely for you to find something like that in nature. So that falls in with the tourism industry. And when it comes to the ecosystem, it plays a very big role because it's a keystone species in the biodiversity here on Praslin. So what that means is that other species that you found here in this biodiversity, most of them will depend on Coco de Mer for them to survive. So if something happens to the Coco de Mer, let's say it goes extinct or the population goes down, yeah, you will have an imbalance in the ecosystem. So that's why, in general, we protect it so everything else can thrive. Another term that we use in science is an umbrella species. So what I'm saying is like Coco de Mer is like an umbrella, it protects everything else beneath it, you can see. So by protecting Coco de Mer, everything else in this ecosystem can be protected. So other things that it does is like fund for our conservation effort that we're doing here in SIF, not only here in VDM, also on Aldabra. It generates a lot of money, as you guys know. So moving on, the research or the program that we have here on the Coco de Mer is the regeneration program, which started in 2012. So what happens here, we have SIF staff, mostly field workers that look after CDM nuts in general, to see their growth and to keep an eye on them in general, because you guys know how CDM is very expensive. So we have a lot of poaching activities that were going on back in the days. So what happened by starting the regeneration program, the field workers will go out in the field, they will keep an eye on the CDM, they will cover their nuts and keep an eye on their growth. And by doing that, they will minimize the chance of having their nut poached in general. So every once a month, we will go in and check these nuts to make sure that everything is okay in their growth stage, and the field workers will get a payment. And also, the main reason we started that is to protect the CDM for the future. We make sure that there is a sustainable level of CDM, which is at least 20%. And pretty much in the future, that's going to increase to more, because CDM is a very slow growing plant. So it's going to take a very long time for that to increase. And right now, that number might have changed. We have at least 545 nut being monitored here in the Vallée de Mai. So how it works is when a CDM is growing and it's still attached to the nut, this is when we monitor them. But as soon as they detach, these nuts will be removed from the program. But we still keep on measuring them to get an idea on how the plant fare without the nut providing energy in general. Okay, so here you will see some of the staff doing the measurement of the CDM leaves. So we do that every 3 months, if I'm correct. So that project started in 2016, and there were like 406 plants that were put in the program. They are still being measured, and data is still being gathered on these plants. There's not much information that I can give you now, but as soon as there is an update, SIF will find a way to let you guys know. Okay, so recent findings. These have been found maybe last year when Katie was here. She was doing a certain research on the CDM. As you can see, back in the days, we believe that the CDM nut will stay attached to their seedling for 2 to 3 years in general. But recently we found that it can stay up to 7 years. That's a very long time. So people who come in VDM and poach these nuts that are still attached to their seedling in general, they might cause the plant to die, because some of them, depending on the plant in general, they like to depend on the nut, even though they're pretty much old. So if you remove the nut, it might shock the plant, it might just die. Yeah. And the longest record that we have that has been attached to the CDM tree is like 91 months, and that's 7.5 years. So you can imagine how long that is. So the average time is 5 months, as you can see. All right, so let's go to some key factors of the CDM part here. So the leaves are one of the largest leaves in the world, of course. It can grow up to 7 to 10 meters long and 4 or 5 meters wide, which is very large. People like to use them in construction back in the days, but since CDM is under protection these days, people don't use it that much, and it's quite expensive, of course. And also, there's one organization, SPT, that still sell the CDM leaves, but here at VDM, we don't do these things because we're trying to regenerate the forest in general. We keep everything in the forest without removing them, apart from the CDM nut in general, because we need the money to help conserve the environment in general. Okay, so I've mentioned that it's a key species here in the biodiversity, and also we don't sell it to China anymore. So you guys must be aware of that. Back in the days, we used to sell the how will we say that? The ivory of CDM. We used to export that to China, but we don't do it anymore. Or probably we sell it to other people, but the money that we generate, we use it to put back into conservation. All right, so here we have, we're nearly at the end, I can say. So something that I haven't mentioned earlier, we do have a new program going on with the CDM nut. Probably you guys have heard of it. It's possible now for Seychelles to buy CDM nut to enter their home. So probably you guys can spread the word. So what you have to do is just to fill a form and send that to SIF, and they will process it. I think you have to pay a 500 rupee fee, and you can get up to 5 or 3 nuts, depending on how large your piece of land is. So that will help the population of CDM to grow in general. So it's not safe to have all your fruit in the same basket, but to have it in other people's home and all over Seychelles, that would be great in general. So as you can see, Vallée de Mai is very important to our economy. So please let people know that do not poach and protect CDM in general. Yeah, and that's me. Do you guys have any questions? Any question? No?
Okay, Leroy, it looks like everything was clear. There's no question from the participants.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Yes, Eve.
Okay. One question that popped up here is, how do you count the age of the coco de mer, especially when they are like a small seedling?
I can hear you earlier.
How do you count the age of a coco de mer, the young ones and the adult one?
So basically there's no really technique for you to do that. You need to find, how can I say that? You need to see the seedling from growth to adulthood, but you can estimate it. I don't really know how you can estimate the age, because you guys know how trees, you can count the age of trees. Because when you count them, you can see the ring inside the trees, but CDM, they don't have that. So pretty much one technique I've heard people say, but I don't know if it's effective, you can count the rings on the outside of the bark. But different trees have different growth rate than others. Some will grow faster, some will grow slower. So to answer you, we don't really have a way to get the age of these plants. One way you can get it is after the tree till the end of its life.
Okay. And you the one, Kiki.
Oui, ok, quand the young ones, comme si ce qu'il y a droit, ça veut dire que tu pas trop capable de dire.
So when does the trunk comes out? At what age do the trunk comes out?
Come again?
At what age do the trunk comes out of the ground? Do you have a
Usually it depends on the growth, but it will take probably 10 to 15 years for it to show the trunk.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
We've been saying that whenever the trees are young, the ages can be counted by the leaf.
Is that true?
Is that true?
Like I've mentioned, depends on the tree itself. Each tree will have their own growth rate, but we've been told that one leaf can take a year to develop on the young ones.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, looks like there's no more questions for Roy. So thank you very much, Leroy. I would
No
now
problem.
like to invite Jessica to do her presentation about the yellow crazy ants.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, so my name is Jessica Mumo. I'm the YCA team leader. So today I'm gonna brief you a little bit about the project and how it's been going. And if you have any question again at the end, don't hesitate to ask. Okay, so the project, there's me as the team leader, and then we have the research team that helps with all the research work that we need to do. So our aim is to control the yellow crazy ant inside Vallée de Mai and also the boundary. But for us to achieve that, we need to do quite a lot of networking awareness. So today, doing this presentation help us a little bit more to spread out the information for you to be able to spread to the tourists and even your family, for us to the people in general to know what we are doing in regards to the yellow crazy ant. Okay, so yellow crazy ant, well known as YCA in Vallée de Mai, is one of the worst invasive species in the world. It has multiple impacts on the environment, the ecosystem, and they can easily spread out into a community, into a small area. And when they attack the prey, they do spray formic acid that easily it's easily for them to get their prey. I don't know if many of you may know this. The YCA also have a relationship with the plant pets. So like how we say in Creole, lipo, low plant. So they can go and then use the insect for that. And they are super colony. 2 ants, 3 ants can form a super colony in 1 month. So that's why we are very put a lot of initiative to control YCA in Vallée de Mai. So within SIF, Vallée de Mai, the first record on prowling was back in the 90s. And it was first seen in Vallée de Mai in 2009. And in the northeast area of Vallée de Mai. And since 2010, 2018, it has increased a lot. And this has shown during our monitoring that we conduct in Vallée de Mai. And for us to be able to control the density and the distribution of the YCA, we have conducted a lot of training, a lot of baiting. And before baiting, we need to do a lot of monitoring for us to understand the distribution of YCA and how best and to approach them, the strategy to use to be able to eradicate them. Okay, so How you can see on the presentation, this is a map showing the distribution from 2010 to 2018. So by 2017-18, the whole of Vallée de Mai was covered by YCA. Like mentioned before, it creates a great impact on in the environment. And I am very sure that some of you of the guides have seen that there is less species in Vallée de Mai, such as the mollusk, the slugs. It can easily attack their prey. You will think that a snake can move quickly, but YCA is much more quicker than them. In the bottom photo, you can see how it impacts the black parrot, and the nest is fully covered with YCA. Okay. Our keystone species on the Khmer protects a lot, like Leroy have said, protects a lot of the species we have in Vallée de Mai, such as the parrot, the chameleon, and the mollusk. So if the invasion of YCA was like it was in 2018, then these species really get affected. Okay, so what we have done so far since we started the baiting program, we have done a lot of outreach. So our team have gone to schools to explain the impact of YCA and how we can better control them. We have done quite a lot of survey for us to understand what's really happening in the forest and how does YCA affect other species, I've mentioned before. And we also have tried different strategies for us to be able to control them. And part of it is the baiting. So in the third photo, you can see the team in one of the baiting. This is one of our baiting. The first ever baiting we did in Vallée de Mai was in 2019. It took us about 2.5 days to do the baiting. We had only 2 baiting teams. We covered in total 21 hectares. So that's the whole of Vallée de Mai. We used 109 kilograms of bait, and we use quite a lot of technology such as GPS and phone. So like you can see the top map, a lot of tracks showing. So this is, we use GPS for us to understand if we have missed any points, if there is area we need to go again and bait, example. So, and then in the second photo, you can see how we align the section for us to bait. So we send the team out and then they bait those areas. So what we saw after the first baiting, so YCA was very attractive to the bait view. So you can see like the brown granule, so that's the bait, and the YCA are going for it. And the result were a lot of spot we went by the forest, we had a lot of YCA, like it shows on the photo. After each baiting, we do surveys for us to understand if by baiting the area, the number of YCA decrease. So every 2 months after we've done the baiting, we go out and do some survey. This includes both in Vallée de Mai and in Fort Prepare. One of the survey we do is a jam transact. This is by when we put jam in a transact, we see if the concentration of YCA still come to the jam. We also survey the mollusk and gecko. This is for us to know that if mollusk and gecko does have, if baiting does have a reaction in the mollusk and gecko, if they are doing much better, or if baiting is affecting the distribution of mollusk and gecko. So for example, now you can see a mollusk and gecko survey that we do. In Vallée de Mai, the numbers of mollusk have slowly increased from what we had before, and even for the 4 paper one, the number of species have increased. It's a slow pace of increase, but they are getting there. From the jamming, you can see there's two maps. So we have the August map of 2019. This was before we did the first baiting. And then we had another map in October 2019. And you can see that the different coloration have changed. So before baiting, we had YCA in a lot of area. And after the bait, the line changed. So that means that that there is less YCA present in those areas. Okay, and then we did a second baiting. So we changed a little bit of our tactics, our strategies. We had more teams. We did still cover the same area, the Vallée de Mai, but different tactics. We wanted to know which strategy works better. We still use a lot of GPS, a lot of device, a little bit of more bait, and the result was extraordinary. So like you can see, when using the GPS, we had more line covered, the people were more easy with the bait, they know how to throw their bait, so it was much more better. After the second and the third, the first and the second baiting, we did two more. So now we are planning our fifth baiting, which will be in April. We wish to have a smaller section, more team for this baiting. Before any baiting has done before, we do quite a lot of training to make sure that everybody knows how to use a GPS, for example. Everybody knows how many steps you need to take before you throw your bait, the navigation. And it's a very long day. There's a lot of planning involved with it. So maybe most of you have seen us when it's baiting time. We're all wearing a yellow t-shirt for people to know that, okay, there's a baiting going on. We even put posters outside of the VDM office so that people know actually, okay, yes, there's a baiting going on and we are trying to control YCA. We're not eliminating them, but we are trying to control YCA. This is a small map just showing you how much effort we have put into the baiting. So before, like I showed you before, there was quite a lot of YCA still in Vallée de Mai. But now all the yellow dots, the white dot that you are seeing, this means there is no YCA at all in the Vallée de Mai. So from 2010, when we had 100% coverage of YCA in Vallée de Mai, now we have reached 2% of YCA in Vallée de Mai. So it's a big change we have done. So hopefully from this, we will start seeing an increase of different species in Vallée de Mai. And our is to not just make Vallée de Mai and Font-Pépère, but also the edge of the area. So how the area will act as a buffer zone, and this will allow no YCA to come in, so our project will be very successful. Like mentioned before, after each of the baiting, we conduct monitoring just for us to understand what's really happening with baiting the area. Okay, I have come to the end of the presentation. If you have any question, please do not hesitate to ask.
Hi, we know that the yellow crazy ants are invasive. Do we know, one, where they came from, and two, how they came to be in Vallée de Mai?
Okay, so it's they are very dispersed around the world. Some of the literature that we actually read, they say they come from Asia, and the story behind their invasion to the Seychelles first was say that they came from a ship that was containing a lot of wood, and then by not containing the container, so the ants got out. And for Vallée de Mai also, it's because of construction work that was happening back then, and then the spread went into Vallée de Mai. Like I said, they are very super colony, they spread really easily. So by just carrying one or two on your clothes, that can easily populate the area.
And is there anything people can do outside the reservation to assist with the control of the species?
You only have to like use the bait, the fertilizer for you to be able to, pesticide for you to be able to control the YCA. But at home, you can also put some pesticide, such as some squeezy in a lotion, or just something sweet. Like I know a lot of houses have a lot of YCA, so you can put some sweet food in a liquid, so that will attract them and come into that solution. But outside of the reserve, for you guides, when you're coming in the reserve, what you can do to help us is to tell the tourists not to have any fruit product, or when you're done using a packet of chips or a lemonade, please put it in the corrected bin. Do not throw it in the forest, or make sure before you come in, there's no invasive species such as the yellow crazy ant in your bag, or just check your clothes. And that will help us a lot in stopping them from coming back into the reserve.
Thanks, that's a really good point.
Any more questions?
Okay, Jessica, thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Maria.
Welcome. I will now like to invite Irma to do her presentation about Hepofauna.
So, hi, my name is Irma. I'm the research officer at Vallée de Mai. So today I'm gonna do a short presentation, briefly, about Hepofauna. So worldwide, crisis with reptiles and amphibians is in rapid decline. Monitoring programs in Vallée de Mai, reptiles and amphibians are going on. So there is still a big gap in knowledge of reptiles and amphibians that are found. So there's still a lot that we don't know about reptiles and amphibians. So the Seychelles is very rich in reptiles and amphibians diversity in Vallée de Mai, and there are about 18 different species of reptiles and amphibians together. So Vallée de Mai is ideal for establishing long-term monitoring surveys. Previous work has been one-off project focused on individual species or families, for example, Trachygaster, geckos from the Bronze Ice. IAS and IAS are one of the major threats to the species of Vallée de Mai. So there are lots of different threats to amphibians and reptiles, which has habitat loss, degradation, and there is also one disease. It's called the chytrid fungus amphibian disease, and this has caused decline in amphibian populations worldwide. So now we're going to talk about the species found in Vallée de Mai. The smallest gecko species of the Bronze Ice is the dwarf bronze gecko, Eronis tachiscopias. There's the bronze eye gecko, which is the Seychellensis, and the biggest, which is the giant bronze gecko, Trachygaster. We also have the 2-day geckos, which is the Phelsuma, the Seychelles day gecko, and the Sunburgee, which is the Sunburgee day gecko. We have 3 species of skinks. There's the Seychelles skinks, the Gardiner's burrowing skink, and the Brower's burrowing skink. We have 2 chameleons. There's the tiger chameleon that is found on Mahé, Poilin, and Silhouette. And we have the Seychelles chameleon that is only found on Poilin. You want me to go back? Okay. Okay. So we have the 2 snakes, which is the wool snake and the house snake. We also have the Seychelles tree frog, the Jicaco, Tachynis seychellensis, and we have the Poilin suglosis, which is the tiny frog. And even that tiny frog, as I say, there's a lot of research that still needs to go on around these species. So some of the previous work that has been focused, they have been on the giant bronze gecko population, territory, Sicilian genetics, niche partitioning between geckos. So herpetofauna education, increase the awareness of reptiles and amphibians in Vallée de Mai and the threats to them worldwide, improve public opinion of reptiles and amphibians, stress the importance of reptiles and amphibians in a complete ecosystem. So that is especially by the guides around when they go around with the tourists, the other person who's going to create awareness amongst other individuals outside of research about the importance of reptiles and maybe lower the threats, for example, poaching that goes on. So recently, there's been a new law in Seychelles where the Cabinet of Ministers has approved new regulations to protect two reptiles in Seychelles from exploitation and trafficking. There's the giant bronze gecko, the Trachygaster, and the Seychelles tiger chameleon. Thank you for listening. Ms. Maria.
Okay. Are there any questions for Irma? All right. Question for Irma. So I will, if there's no question, I will now invite Mr. Jean-Baptiste. Mr. Jean-Baptiste is the site manager of Vallée de Mai, who will now do the closing remarks. Okay, Mr. Jean-Baptiste, over to you.
Can I just say one thing?
Okay, yes, Monica.
Which is that if tour guides see us in the forest doing something weird, because we're normally doing something weird, by all means ask what we're doing. And if we've got, we might be too busy, but might be able to stop and explain or tell people what we're surveying for or what it is that we're up to. And I would prefer it, we would all prefer it if you asked rather than sort of trying to pretend we weren't there or took a guess or something, because we will definitely, explain what we're doing and what we're up to. That's all.
All right, thank you very much, Monica. So over to you, Mr. Mark.
Okay, time available to listen to what SIF, Seychelles Science Foundation, has to do in terms of biodiversity monitoring at the Vallée de Mai. Despite the COVID challenge that is keeping us away physically to be able to pass on the knowledge to you, but we are glad today. We have managed to bring you on a virtual platform so that you can hear and listen to the latest update of information about the biodiversity monitoring in the Vallée de Mai. So as an ambassador of the Vallée de Mai, when you do sell your excursion, so I know Vallée is number one on Pralin, it is very important, equally extremely important for all stakeholders to be able to gather the correct information so that we are on the same page in terms of updating information. So I have no doubt, and I am pretty sure that the updated information that you receive today will be put into good use, especially when you bring your clients to the Vallée de Mai. And I assure you that this is not the last time that we will be engaging with you to be able to pass on our knowledge. So this is the first, but we intend to continue this kind of consultation, whereby we can share even more information about the UNESCO World Heritage Site with you. So without further delay, I would once again like to thank you for participating in this virtual tour, and I do wish you all the best with everything. Stay safe, and that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mark, for your remark. Thank you to all the presenters once again.